Welcome to the Office of Public Instruction's Student Records Confidentiality Policy Training. This video will focus on the Office of Public Instruction's responsibilities and policy in place to protect student information and processes. In 2005, the Montana legislature defined a basic system of free, quality education that included the requirements to assess and track student achievement. The legislature appropriated funds to the OPI to develop and implement a statewide student information system, which we call AIM, that provides accurate and timely information about the performance of Montana's K-12 students and schools. AIM also supports education information and processes at the state and local level. This presentation will cover the following items. What prompted the policy? Who does the policy protect? Related policies, student locator information, cell suppression policy, disclosure of student information, access to data, and handling data requests. OPI has managed student records for many years in special education, Carl Perkins, and migrant and adult basic education, and we have had rules in place that were adopted by the Board of Public Education. Many of our staff are well versed in FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. With AIM, we have a large amount of student data located in one system, and OPI employees have access to much more data than they ever had in the past. The Student Records Confidentiality Policy, which was updated in 2015, is designed to protect the privacy rights of students and their families both from the intentional and unintentional release of data caused by mismanagement and negligence. The policy also protects OPI by ensuring there is an office-wide policy to follow and that agency leadership has considered the processes needed to protect the data in terms of staff practices and individual security. The decision about releasing data to the public is not left up to OPI as individuals. There are policies in place to guide OPI staff in terms of what can be posted on the web and which data will be released by agreement between the OPI and the requester. In addition to the Student Records Confidentiality Policy, there are several related policies and procedures which apply to all contractors and employees of OPI and to entities requesting access to confidential, sensitive, or restricted student information. Related policies, laws, operating procedures, and other documents which contain directives that apply to agency confidential, sensitive, and restricted enterprise information are listed on this slide. Links to these are at the end of the slideshow. Student-centered data collection systems such as AIM require the ability to assign a unique student identifier. An identifier is a computer-generated random number with no embedded meaning that is assigned to an individual student. This unique identifier is sometimes referred to as the state ID. For the identifier to be unique, each student cannot have more than one identifier, and each identifier cannot be associated with more than one student. To ensure each student only has one identifier and that a single identifier has not been assigned to more than one student, it is necessary for school personnel to review and locate whether a student has already been assigned to a unique identifier before assigning a new identifier to a newly enrolling student. The process of reviewing and locating whether a student has already been assigned a unique identifier requires school personnel to access student locator information. Student personnel can only see 4 data elements of the student record. Those data elements are student name, date of birth, gender, and state ID. Once the student has been located, the district will enroll the student. Authorized school personnel have access to confidential student locator information provided they have a reason for gaining access, such as the responsibility to assign unique student identifiers or to determine whether the student has already been assigned a unique student identifier, as may be the case if a student has transferred from one Montana school to another. All authorized school personnel who have access to confidential information must be familiar with policies and procedures to ensure confidentiality. The OPI encourages districts to share the unique student identifier with parents. If a student transfers from one school to another within Montana, the parents can give the unique student identifier to the new district. The cell suppression policy states that no cells of data that contain 5 or fewer students in a group will be publicly reported or released by OPI and must be suppressed to protect the identity of the student. Exceptions to this policy are enrollment, grade level, and gender, which are reportable down to 1. Special education disability counts of fewer than 10 will be suppressed. The OPI suppresses data in the form of percentages when the percentages are of 0 or 100, or if the count that makes up that percent is 5 or fewer for any student demographic categories, with the exception of reports required under the State Accountability Workgroup under ESSA. The OPI will report student counts to the U.S. Department of Education and other federal agencies as required by federal laws and regulations governing education grant programs. The OPI will not suppress data reported to federal agencies. These federal agencies are subject to FERPA policy and regulations regarding the disclosure of confidential student information. Part of the education record includes personal information about a student that can be made public according to this policy. The OPI may disclose without consent student information in aggregate form which is not easily traceable to a student. The OPI will disclose education records without consent to the following parties under the following conditions: other schools when a student is transferring in order to facilitate school enrollment, specified officials for audit or evaluation purposes, organizations authorized by a school to conduct certain studies for or on behalf of a school, and appropriate officials in case of health and state emergencies. OPI has developed a data tiers chart which explains the tiers of data and how data will be released. In summary, Tier 1 data is not confidential and is available for anyone to download off of the web. Counts are reportable down to 1 according to policy. Tier 2 is suppressed aggregate data and is available for anyone to download off of the web. Counts of 5 or fewer are suppressed according to policy. Tier 3 is unsuppressed aggregate data, available only with an approved data request proposal. Counts of 5 or fewer are included. Tier 4 is student-level data and would be available only with an approved data request proposal. Data would not be suppressed. Tier 1 and Tier 2 data are available through GEMS, which is the OPI's statewide longitudinal education data warehouse. Access to confidential information carries with it the responsibility to protect the data. Access is granted only to personnel who are authorized by the employee's supervisor on a need-to-know basis for the performance of their duties. The OPI security officer then sets up each user's access with a unique ID and password, and access is granted based on the employee's job duties. Each OPI employee is required to complete the OPI Student Record Confidentiality Policy training on the Learning Hub and must sign a confidentiality agreement. Authorization of an employee to access student-level data must be evaluated annually in order to ensure access to information is still required. Intentional violations of the policy by an OPI employee may result in formal disciplinary action up to and including termination, denial of access to sensitive data, and revocation of network access privileges. Violations of this policy by agents of the OPI, other entities, or researchers, whether through negligence or intent, will be subject to potentially permanent loss of access to education records and payment for the defense of all claims asserted against the state as a result of the violation. The OPI may utilize all legal remedies to recover any financial loss to the state which occurs due to negligent or intentional acts which constitute a violation of this policy. Access to confidential information carries with it the responsibility to protect the data. The following procedures have been put into place in order to protect confidential data at the OPI. OPI staff are required to protect the visibility of reports and computer monitors when displaying confidential information. Workstations must be locked or shut down when unattended. Paper reports must be shredded and electronic files must be destroyed when no longer needed in accordance with the Montana Secretary of State Local Government Retention and Disposal Schedule. Confidential student information will not be faxed or sent through regular email. Email must be encrypted. Paper reports, CDs, and diskettes containing confidential data must be stamped or otherwise marked as confidential prior to being released outside the agency. Aggregate reports are prepared for staff unless they are authorized to have access to student-level data. Policies and procedures are in place for storing and securing confidential data. In addition to specific OPI staff having access to confidential data, access may be granted to the following entities under the following circumstances. Agents of the OPI. Agents of the OPI is an entity who contracts with the OPI or the U.S. Department of Education and has a written authorization from the Department of Education to analyze confidential data or to provide some other service involving confidential data. Other entities. All other entities will be denied access to confidential information unless the entity is using the data to develop, validate, or administer predictive tests or to improve instruction as defined in FERPA. Authorized representatives of the Comptroller General of the United States, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, or state and local educational authorities will be provided access to the data provided the disclosure is in the course of an audit, evaluation, compliance, or enforcement proceeding as defined in FERPA. The information will be protected to shield personal identification of students by others, and the information will be destroyed when no longer needed. Researchers. Researchers who are not an agent of the OPI or who are not employed or contracted by the agency or school may be authorized to conduct data processing or research and evaluation studies through contractual agreement. Requests will be handled on a case-by-case basis after the request has been approved by the OPI Data Privacy and Security Committee. OPI receives a number of information and data requests from researchers and has standardized the approval process in order to handle these requests in a fair and timely manner. A significant amount of data can be extracted through GEMS, eliminating the need for many of the data requests. External data requests for specific information in Tiers 3 and 4 will be honored only if one of the following is true. The material has already been published or collected and can be easily put into distribution format that protects confidential information. The requester completes the process for conducting research with OPI data and has their proposal approved by the OPI Data Privacy and Security Committee. Directions for an application to conduct research with student-level data collected by OPI can be found on GEMS under Contact Us. The OPI Data Privacy and Security Committee reviews each request on a case-by-case basis. If the request is approved, the researcher must sign a confidentiality agreement and will be briefed on the OPI Student Records Confidentiality Policy. The adoption and enforcement of the OPI Student Records Confidentiality Policy demonstrates that the OPI takes privacy and confidentiality seriously. The OPI will continue to research approaches that could enhance the privacy of our students and further strengthen the security of the system. Public access is only given for the purposes of viewing reports where the data is rolled up and no personally identifiable information is available. Confidential or personally identifiable data is not stored on any removable storage media. If you have specific questions about this policy, feel free to contact the Measurement and Accountability Division Administrator at 444-0793 or visit the OPI AIM website at opi.mt.gov/AIM. Thank you for taking the time to review this presentation.